I stepped outside just after sunrise, coffee in hand, expecting the same quiet morning my land always gave me. But halfway down the porch steps, I froze. My wife was standing near the fence, fear in her eyes, our young son hiding behind her leg. And in front of them, 3 HOA guards in cheap gray uniforms, banging on my gate like they owned the place. One of them yelled, "This area falls under HOA authority now. Move back or we'll remove you ourselves." My wife tried to explain, voice shaking. "This land is not part of your HOA, stay away." But they stepped closer. Behind them, a beat-up gray HOA SUV idled, logo peeling off, lights flickering like a bad joke. One guard pointed at my son and smirked. "Rules apply to everyone, even your little family." My coffee cup slipped from my hand and shattered on the steps. I walked toward them slow, controlled. But my blood was boiling. That was the moment they realized. They hadn't just trespassed. They hadn't just crossed a line. They came after my family, on my land. And that was the moment I stopped being polite. "You made the biggest mistake of your life coming here. Before we move forward, comment your country or city below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you believe in justice for ordinary people, hit that like button and subscribe, because this channel stands for truth over power." The sun barely crested the horizon as I stepped onto the porch, coffee in hand, savoring the quiet hum of my land. Morning dew clung to the grass, the scent of pine and earth filling the air. Everything was calm, just the way I liked it. My wife was in the garden, tending to the small vegetable patch, and my son chased a butterfly across the yard, laughing without a care in the world. But then, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Tire marks in the dirt, leading straight to the edge of my property. My heart tightened. HOA had been pushing boundaries for months, claiming oversight over land that had never belonged to them. Still, I never expected this, them coming here, uninvited, to harass my family. I walked closer to the fence, squinting into the morning haze, and that's when I saw them, cheap gray uniforms, scuffed boots, a gray HOA SUV parked behind them, logo peeling, lights flickering. The guards were standing too close to my wife and child, arguing aggressively, their voices cutting through the peaceful morning like sirens. A chill ran down my spine. Something told me this wasn't just another meaningless visit. Today, the line had been crossed, and I would make sure they knew the cost of crossing it. I stepped closer, heart pounding, as the shouting grew louder. One of the guards, a lanky man with a crooked cap, leaned against the fence, pointing at my wife. "This land is now under HOA control. Step back immediately," he barked, his voice sharp and overconfident. My wife squared her shoulders, trying to stay calm, though her hands trembled. "This is our property. You have no right to be here," she shouted. The guard sneered, taking a step toward her. "Rules apply to everyone, lady. Even your little family." Behind them, the gray HOA SUV idled, its cheap rotating light flickering. The word HOA stared back at me like a warning. Another guard, shorter, with a cheap uniform that barely fit, started filming them on a handheld device, probably thinking he could twist the story later. I noticed how poorly stitched their patches were, their scuffed boots dragging dirt across the lawn, all symbols of their arrogance disguised as authority. My son peeked from behind my wife, eyes wide with fear. My stomach churned. This was more than trespassing. This was intimidation, targeting my family in the place we should feel safest. I took a deep breath, stepping fully onto the land, the gravel crunching under my boots. Every instinct screamed at me to act. I locked eyes with the leader guard, the tension thick enough to slice through. This was their first mistake. And they had no idea just how far I would go to protect my family. I walked toward them slowly, every step measured, calm on the outside, fire inside. The HOA guards didn't flinch, at least, they tried not to. My black baseball cap shadowed my eyes, but they could feel the intensity burning behind them. "Step off my land," I said, my voice low but firm. "Now." The leader guard laughed, leaning on his cheap baton. Or what? We have HOA authority. You can't stop us. I stopped a few feet from him, hands relaxed but ready. I can, and I will. You're trespassing. My family is under my protection. You leave, or the consequences are yours. He smirked, clearly thinking he had the upper hand, while his two backup guards shifted nervously. Behind them, the gray HOA SUV sat like a fortress on wheels, the HOA logo glaring in the morning sun. One guard tried to step closer, maybe to intimidate me physically, but I planted my feet firmly. The tension was electric, like the calm before a storm. Listen closely, I continued, holding up a set of documents I had prepared weeks ago, legal paperwork, property deeds, and HOA boundaries. Everything you're doing here is illegal. If you touch my family, if you step past that fence again, you're personally responsible. The guards glanced at each other, a flicker of doubt crossing their faces. For the first time, the arrogance in their cheap gray uniforms wavered. My wife stood just behind me, holding my son's hand. I could see the fear in her eyes, but also the trust, knowing I wouldn't let anything happen to them. I leaned slightly forward, my voice cutting through the tension like steel. This is your final warning. Leave my land. Now. For a brief moment, silence fell. The morning birds paused. Even the gray SUV seemed to hold its breath. They had come to intimidate my family. But I was the one standing tall. And that realization hit them hard. The first guard's smirk faltered, but the leader guard's arrogance remained. He barked into a cheap radio clipped to his belt. We need backup. The landowner's refusing to comply. I noticed the other guards shifting nervously, glancing at each other, sensing the storm about to break. Their confidence was cracking, but they weren't ready to admit it yet. You're calling for reinforcements? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Go ahead. It won't change anything. Behind them, the gray HOA SUV engine rumbled louder. I could see their backup units approaching from the distant road, another SUV, dust rising behind it. The guards' eyes flicked toward it, a hint of panic crossing their faces. One of the younger guards stepped forward, aiming his cheap handheld camera at me and my family. Smile for the HOA record, he sneered. Everything you do is being documented. Any move, we'll twist it. I took a slow step closer. Do you really think illegal intimidation counts as justice? This land, my family, they're under my protection. Touch us, and you're facing the law personally. The leader guard's voice rose, angry and trembling. You don't understand the rules. I raised a hand, showing my legal documents. I understand better than you think. Your authority stops at the fence. Step back. Leave. Or face real consequences. My wife gripped my arm, whispering, Please, don't let them push you over. My eyes met my son's, hiding behind her. That small, scared face ignited every ounce of fire inside me. The air was thick, almost unbearable. The guards had expected an easy confrontation. Instead, they were trapped in a corner of law and truth they hadn't prepared for. Their cheap uniforms and gray SUV, symbols of their false authority, suddenly looked fragile, almost laughable. A tense beat passed. I didn't move. They didn't move. The silence spoke louder than any words. And then, I knew this was the moment where everything would either end peacefully or escalate beyond their control. The backup SUV finally arrived, dust swirling around its wheels, as two more guards in the same cheap gray uniforms jumped out. Their leader, slightly older with a rough jawline, stepped forward, trying to radiate authority. You can't do this alone, he spat, pointing at me. You'll face HOA consequences for obstruction. I met his gaze calmly, black baseball cap shadowing my eyes. I'm not alone. I have the law, my family, and the truth on my side. You have nothing but arrogance and a gray uniform. He sneered and attempted to push past me. I planted my feet, the gravel crunching under my boots, and raised my hands to stop him physically, not with violence, but sheer presence. "Back off," I said, my voice low, dangerous, unwavering. "Step off my land, or every step you take from here on is your responsibility." The younger guards exchanged uneasy glances. The leader hesitated, his bravado faltering. My hand reached for the folder of documents I had prepared, property deeds, HOA boundaries, and legal notices proving zero authority over this land. I held them up like a shield. "Here's proof. Every claim you've made is illegal. Every step you take past that fence is trespassing. And my family is under my protection." The leader guard froze, suddenly aware of his precarious situation. Sweat dotted his forehead. The other guards shifted awkwardly, realizing their bluff was being exposed. Behind them, the gray HOA SUVs sat, their logos suddenly meaningless, cheap authority stripped bare. My wife stood behind me, holding our son's hand, trembling but steadfast. I could see the fear in her eyes, but also trust. Trust that I would not allow anyone to harm them. For the first time, I saw real hesitation, a crack in their armor of false authority. The guards had come to intimidate, to harass, to impose power. Now, they faced someone who would not bend, who would not fear, and who knew the law as well as the stakes. And in that pause, the balance shifted. The arrogance that had filled the air moments ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, creeping realization they had underestimated me, and they would regret it. The shift in their faces was obvious, the confidence drained out like someone pulled the plug. But still, the leader guard tried to salvage authority he never had in the first place. He stepped forward again, though this time, much slower. "You think a stack of papers scares us? We have jurisdiction," he snapped, but his voice cracked at the end. Before I could respond, a distant engine growled. Not the cheap HOA SUVs. This sound had weight. Authority. The kind of sound that makes guilty men swallow hard. A neighbor from 2 lots down, Mr. Dalton, rolled up in his truck, pulling out his phone and recording everything. "Been filming since they arrived," he shouted. "They were threatening your family. Sheriff's on the way." The guard stiffened. One muttered, "Oh hell," under his breath. I didn't have to say a word. Their regret was written all over them. Moments later, the sheriff's cruiser turned onto the dirt road, red and blue lights cutting through the morning haze. The HOA guard stepped back instinctively, as if distance could erase what they'd done. The sheriff, tall, stern, and clearly irritated, slammed his door shut and walked right up to the leader guard. "What in God's name are you boys doing out here?" The leader guard tried to adjust his cheap uniform, suddenly aware of how ridiculous he looked. "Sheriff, this land falls under." The sheriff held up a hand sharply. "No. It does not. I've told your HOA board 3 times, their authority ends at the paved road." He pointed at the dirt under their boots. "This ain't the paved road." Another guard stammered, "We were just following orders." "Orders?" the sheriff barked. "Harassing a woman and child? Trespassing? Threatening removal? These are crimes, son." The guard swallowed hard. Their faces pale. All that bravado gone, washed away by the weight of real law. My wife tightened her grip on my son as the sheriff turned toward me. "You all right?" I nodded. "We are now." The sheriff faced the guards again. "You boys get in your SUVs, turn around, and leave. Any step forward from this moment, and I start writing charges." The guards didn't argue. Didn't threaten. Didn't posture. They simply backed away, fast, fumbling into their gray SUVs, almost tripping over each other as the engine sputtered to life. Their regret wasn't silent. It was loud, frantic, and desperate. And it was only just beginning. The gray SUVs disappeared down the dirt road, dust clouds lingering like a fading threat. My wife exhaled slowly, wrapping her arms around our son, who peeked at me with wide, cautious eyes. The fear was still there, but the danger had passed. For now, the land was ours, and our family was safe. Sheriff Dalton stayed a few minutes longer, taking statements and confirming that the HOA had overstepped every legal boundary. "You've done everything right," he told me. "Your documents, your proof, everything was solid. They won't be trying this again." The HOA guards, cheap uniforms and all, had left their arrogance behind, replaced with the bitter taste of humiliation and fear. I knew the incident would be reported to the HOA board, fines would follow, and investigations would dig up every detail of their harassment. Justice wasn't instant, but it was inevitable. I walked along the property line, surveying my land. Each tree, every patch of soil, every fence post, they all belonged to us. And I would defend it again if I had to. That morning left a mark, not just on the HOA, but on me. It reminded me that power without truth is fragile. It reminded me that a family, united and protected, is stronger than any uniformed bully. And it reminded me that standing up for what's yours isn't just a choice, it's a responsibility. As I watched the sun climb higher, glinting off the fence and the distant road, I knew the HOA guards would think twice before ever harassing another family. They came with intimidation, with arrogance, with the belief that cheap gray uniforms gave them authority. They left with regret, exposed, and powerless. That day, the land, my family, and the truth stood unbroken. And the HOA learned the hard way: you never cross someone who will fight for their family and their rights.